everyone, and welcome back to Regal Tails. Today I'm going to be continuing more of this game. Last off, when we left off, we got pretty damn sad. Medina died, from what I could tell. Zuda passed away right in Nadja's arms. And we're currently trying to save Solare's life. So without further ado, here we go. She crossed the field toward him, just enough to reach shouting distance. Any attempts to cry out to him were muffled by the stampede of knights. On horseback, cutting her off, the lifeless bodies of Imperial knights dragging behind them. Her attention was directed toward the messenger, meager cries and moans coming from the Imperials. Once her gaze returned to the Emperor, she dropped to her knees. She bore witness to the Emperor's headless corpse. And in a blink of an eye, Nadja knew that the Empire finally fell. Sora's motionless body stood idly before crumbling to the ground. An abysmal dread anchored Nadja's legs to the ground. She couldn't stay away from what she witnessed. This war had become a murder. The honor that goes into fighting your homeland was shuffled out for praising of cruelty. Even though she desired nothing more than to kill Sora herself, she still would have given him the dignity of a fallen soldier of war, not this. Why was this upsetting to her? She asked herself. What was it about this highborn's death that filled her with regret? Good bloody riddance. Karm, you've become my least favorite character of this game, and I wish to kill you. The grizzly general boasted behind Nadja. His words were bittersweet as he heckled out. Well, Nadja, this war of ours is over. Nothing is going to stand in my way now that the Emperor is dead. I guess we have to thank you, don't we? Go back to Chef's car. What's left of your families, your people, we're done with you. Karm turned away and she headed back toward the hilltop, but was met with a sense of weightlessness. He felt the harsh sense of gravity as his back was slammed to the ground. His shoulders were pinned down by the raging lioness. Nadja felt a surge of energy that had laid dormant inside her, roared to life in her. The mere mention of her family was that unleashed renewed strength. Throughout the petrified horror she beheld, how could she have forgotten the one thing that mattered most to her, Medina? She pinned the bear down by the neck and hissed out, "Where is she?" The general's face flared up with rage, spite, and desperation for air while clawing at Nadja's arm. Grrrf. That's the only way I can pronounce that. Nadja leaned her maw down, fangs hovering inches away from the bear's eyes. She cackled out a bloody growl. There was a lion cub in my camp, so help you. If anything happened to her, A commotion of heavily armored knights stampeded over to aid their fallen general. Arrows and spears aimed at the lioness. Nadja, blind in her own maternal frenzy, growled with a malice in her eyes. She was more than ready to tear through this army to see her daughter. She felt a dense thud against her forearm. General Karm tapped frantically against her as his face turned bright shades of blue. She lightly loosened her grip on his neck. Tell me! Karm batted at her arm to get air in his lungs once more. He gasped out. We saw a little girl run into the enemy camp. We've yet to find her. Ack. Nadja bore her talons back down into his fat throat, her eyes intensified with it while snarling at the bear. Which way did you see her go? Karm didn't respond. He was too occupied trying to lift Nadja's arm off his throat. Nadja glared up at the surrounding men. Her eyes blazed with the burning fire around them. Anyone! They all staggered back to the traumatizing roar Nadja let out. The majority of them pointed north at the encampment, with only a few stragglers pointing in random directions. They were unaware of the situation. She snapped to her feet and darted north. She paid no mind to who was in her way, or what Karm was shouting to her as she left him on his back. Nadja was proud to find her daughter. So Nadina might be still alive. Nadja stormed through the burning ruins of the Imperial camp. Close-up knights scavenged throughout the camp for whatever wasn't burned. How often they would find cluster together and block Nadja's path. Chivalry broke through their lines, never giving them the time of day to respond. Everywhere she turned, her eyes spun in every direction, seeking out any clue as to where her daughter went. She could barely keep her head on the straight when fear irking its way into her mind. How could the Empire betray their agreement? How could my clan fall this easily? Why? Why did Medina rush into the Imperial camp to avenge me? These train of thoughts circled around her head endlessly. They clouded her mind to the point she began to comfort in thinking about the issue rather than see them before her. Every passing step she took, she had witnessed more and more of her men weighed to the waist alongside the Imperials. She couldn't process the sight of them anymore. Her focus was on her family. Her own world was in danger, and she needed to keep it safe. Magina! Her heart was in her throat as she cried out, tears swelling in her eyes. Regina, sweetie, Mommy's here. Please, come out. You're safe here with me. Nadja clutched her gut once more. The heat from her burning surroundings began scorching the sword in her in blistering pains. Her breathing became heavier and heavier as sweat washed over her face. She needed to get out. Magina, where are you? You're smarter than this. Her throat burned from the heat. She'd suffocate if she'd stay in the camp any longer. She dashed out the nearest marine she could find. Tears trickled down her maw. Her vision became blurry with the sight of the burning camp. Magina, I know you're alive. Sniff. You're going to grow up big, strong, and brave like your mother. Nadja sank to her knees and hugged her wounded gut. She spoke in a muddy sob. Until then, I taught you better than this. You should have been with our allies. A gentle breeze washed across her fur until it suddenly howled into a gale wind. The gusts of air ignited the fires around the camp into a harsh burst of flames. The heat swabbed Nadja's face with searing heat and staggered her afar. Enraged, Nadja hissed out in pain while scraping at the embers burning her face. She aimlessly trailed away from the encampment while she regained her vision. She stopped dead in her tracks as she collided with a tree. Grr. Channeling her rage and balled a fist, she swiped at the tree and took a hefty chunk out of it. She glared off toward the wooden shrapnel whilst it flew into the distance. To her distinct surprise, she spotted something mangling her vision of the wooden debris, a volley of arrows. A dozen arrows were scattered about the tree line. Curiosity got the better of the lioness. It made no sense for this area to be a targeted range for the Imperials. But could it be that? Nadja sprung to her toes and paced over to the arrows. She distanced her attention from the arrows as her eyes gawked in astonishment. Footprints, they were small in comparison to everyone else's. They had to be Magina's. Her head snapped to the forest as she cried out, Magina! Clutching her wound, she hobbled into the forest, her sight on her daughter's tracks. Magina, Magina, she roared her name, ignoring the pain in her gut every time she yelled. The pain was the price she'd happily pay just to see her daughter. What felt like hours searching the dark, dank woods, the tracks ended at a dead end. Nadja frantically sniffed around, searching for every angle the tracks had ended at. Her heart felt heavy once she caught a familiar cloud odor. Nadja shooed away the fear as she stumbled upon claw marks leading up a tree. She circled the tree, gathering for desperation of any sight of Magina. Her senses began to falter as she finally spotted something within the branches, a tail. This is all the evidence she needed. She leapt onto the tree and sank her claws to the rough bark before she hurled herself from one branch to another before finally, Magina! Not Magina. Oh, it is Magina. Magina waited against the branch. Her clothes were tattered and torn. She wouldn't wake up. Nadja held her breath at the sight of her. Her eyes were glassed over with disbelief. She gently shook the little cub's leg. No! Magina, wake up, I'm here. Nadja froze at the chilling touch of her baby. I'm guessing that's her baby because typo. Magina. The tree branch groaned underneath Nadja's feet while her quivering legs sent tremors into the wood until it finally snapped. Nadja pulled and held her daughter to her chest as they fell. She curled herself around Magina. Hitting numerous branches down, she hit the ground with an impactful thud to her arm. Ah. She slowly pulled herself up while hugging Magina tenderly to her lap. Magina, you're awake, sweetie. Yeah. She ran her fingers through the cub's hair, hoping her loving coos would ease her awake. She rested her head on top of Magina's, gently rocking her back and forth and whispered, Wake up, sweetie, please. She gripped Magina's body tighter into her embrace while stroking her back. Her back was wet to the touch. Tears welled in her eyes. Her heart pounded in her chest as if fear itself tried to strangle it from her chest. Nadja hesitated before lifting her paw up, her singed fur stained crimson. She felt dizzy. A sickly knot begins to swell in her as the scent of blood surged through her nose. Nauseated gaze soon found itself on Magina's back. A broken arrow embedded itself into her. Naja lost for words. Couldn't bring herself to bear the ugly truth before her. No. Her breathing wavered. No, Magina, please, don't. She sank forward, clutching her daughter's lifeless corpse. Please, please don't. Her claws brushed through the back of Magina's hair, hugging her face with a throbbing chest. Her heart was ready to burst. The antagonizing pain swells to its brink inside her, bursting out a heart-stricken roar. Her thunderous roar shook the trees. The forest trembled before the mother's sorrowed cry. The wildfire from the encampment crept its way to her at that time. The exhausted lioness ignored the events around her. The precious world she harbored in her arms was snuffed out from her life. All that was left was an empty void. She was to fight for the lords of the court, to win battles in the names of others so that her family might live comfortably. But this isn't what she planned. She thought she could take on an empire. She thought she could save her people from a lot of turmoil. She thought she could trust the people she allied with. She was wrong. She couldn't take it. She couldn't bear the thought. She couldn't even live in the world without her baby. Nadja curled into a ball around her child, held dearly to her breast. She wheezes out while tears freely pour from her. Please, don't do this to me. She would have torn apart worlds to have been with Magina in her final breath, to just one last moment with her. She held her daughter's limp paws while continuing to groom her. Precious memories of her times with her cub flashed before her eyes. From all the times she groomed her from a newborn to proud moments in life, where Magina shot her first arrow. These wholesome moments devastated her heart and soul. Tears rained down across the cub's face, and Nadja whittled them clean where they land. She adorned her sweet daughter's scent as if she were still alive. Nadja gently lifted up her cold paws and kissed the tops endearingly. She didn't want to let go. Her baby ran away into the darkness, cold and afraid. She nuzzled her face into the cub's palm and softly kissed it, yet it didn't feel right. Her scent was muskier. Her heart skipped a beat at the oddity. She looked her daughter's paw up into view, now realizing it was holding a fist. Her tears ceased with all attention hung over the cub's paw. Slowly unbound Magina's fingers and beheld a bloody mess. Her claws were scuffed with blood and held a large spindle of brown fur. Her heart skipped another beat and another until her whole body began to fidget uncontrollably. She recognized the fur and the musk. It was ugly truth she couldn't bring herself to admit yet. There was no escaping it now. Her vision flashed back to Karn and his scar. Her mind's eyes witnessed the scar glow vibrantly redder until it became blinding. The fear she had restrained finally broke free. And devastating gravity pulled her mind into abysmal reality, a reality she needed to face. Her world became bleaker and all the colors fading from the world. The blazing fire overtaking the forest was swiftly snuffed out from the coming dark. The dreadful dark reality she held back in her mind finally began to bleed into being. The world around her blackened, heaving nothing but pitch darkness and a forest decor in flames. The burning trees instantaneously burst into ash like a monsoon. The ash hammered toward Nadja from every direction. Nadja held her paws over her face, trying to block the heated dust from her blinding her eyes. She hissed in pain every time she dared peer out. The heat overwhelmed her, and her blood began to boil. Her palms sweat and throbbed to the beat of her racing heart. Her ears were deafened by the roaring winds, the thunderous hot winds, though they burst her eardrums, but they stopped. Her body felt numb, neither wind nor heat brushed over her. She slowly opened her eyes. The howling wind froze in place before her. She blinked in a terrified awe of confusion. Her attention was drawn elsewhere. Out of the corner of her eye, she watched the ash start to dance wildly. Every time she tried to catch a glimpse of it, the dust would freeze in place. Tried as she might, the visions taunted her on the crease of her gaze. Nadja frantically tried to catch the movement, snapping her head back and forth until her head felt ready to fall off. Every time her vision snapped from one side to another, she started to see something within the ash. She was taken back, stupefied at what she was seeing now. The shape slowly morphed into a crowd of familiar people. Her people. The ash sculpted itself into a scene of her tribe, conversing and at peace with the Imperials. None of them bared any faces, but to her, she could tell they were happy. The haunting winds picked up and feathered the ash and figures away to the winds with a sound of laughter and music walking into the breath. She carried her gaze to where the wind drifted the ash to it, reshaped into a cluster of her people and Imperials gathered around a dinner table. They were all content with each other. No anger or spite was shared between them. At the sound of familiar bellowing horns, the Imperials frenzied into a panic, snapped at her people. Both sides were equally confused. The Imperials attacked while her people retaliated in self-defense. All while in the distance, the grisly figure on horseback sounded the bellowing horn once more, his own army charging forward. The ash burst once more, carrying the groaning horn to the wind. The ash takes form once more, this time the form of everything she denied herself was seen before. Her people had been slaughtered by the fear-mongering Imperials. All the well-kept knights picked off the stragglers. Red-hot embers sizzling from the figure's wounds burst into flames. The fire soon settled into a mound of ash with Karm and his men at the peak. At the slump of the mound rests a figure of her own. Magina lay next to her side while wounded Zuda hunched over her. The ash shifted with Karm, raising a fist. Two well-set lancers materialized, charged down toward Zuda. One lancer impaled Zuda and flung him off his lance, but not before snatching the wolf swords from his limp grip. The second lancer charged towards Medina, but snatched her off her feet. The lion pup fiercely tried to claw her way free, while being escorted back to the mound. The first lancer trotted back to her body, circling it before taking Zuda's sword and embedding it in her gut. The ash burned redder as it burst into flames and reshaped into a towering Karm, holding Medina by the scruff of her neck. Regina broke free of his grip and swiping the red gash across his muzzle. The embers swooped right across the ashen Karm's face. Regina zipped across the field, but she couldn't find safety anywhere. Karm's archer raised his bow. The lion cub let loose his string. The snap of the bow shattered across the ash around her and brought her mind back to reality. The truth of the matter branded itself into her mind. Everything she'd ignored up until now seared into her mind. Her heavy gaze was now fixated solely on the encampment. Kron, his sentinels continued pillaging the Imperial camp. They had stumbled upon the Imperial's arsenal of Bastille. The grizzly admired the craft and design of the war machines before him. Thank the gods we stopped them here today. We'd never have withstood an onslaught like this. He marveled at ammunition racks. Variants of bolts were stacked neatly, many ordained with chains or necks. He gripped his massive paw around the tip of the ballista's arrowhead, his fingers barely meeting around its impressive circumference. How is that they have all the best toys? He turned to his men with a crooked side grin. Seems like we're going to test these on a few cities, shouldn't we? He and the rest of his men began to cackle. He ran his fingertips along the sizable arrowhead. His eyes glimmered with his power-hungry lust. He chuckled louder and louder. He looked to his men with a hearty smirk, a smirk that faded as suddenly as one of his men's head exploded into a pool of viscera. A Shaxkaran's sword sliced out the Forsaken Knight's head before tumbling to the ground. Everyone gawked at the horrendous scene. Speechless, the dead silence quickly roared into commotion as the surrounding men cried out in fear. Karm and his men snapped their attention to where the sword had come from. Only a terrible sight greeted them instead. And a massive tree, uprooted and scorching with flame, had been flung into the air and headed straight toward them. It collided with several of the knights, but its momentum flung it further. There was no hope to dodge around it in the narrow space they were in. Harm's only chance was to outrun it. He hesitated a movement, overcome with dread at the ungodly sight of the crackling wood, headed for his flesh. Snapping from his fascination, he stumbled back on his feet and dashed away from it. His men weren't so quick. Becoming bound in the flames, touched branches and burned beneath the trunk. The burning tree was hot on the grizzly's tail. There was no time to dash to the side now. He scampered as fast as he could. Fear fueled his leap into a nearby tent, tearing his way through the other side. The tree began to slow to a rest. Pulse mangled within the fabric. Golden embers began igniting the tent into an inferno. Karn gasped for air, glaring at the bitter snare of the tree. His rage whirlpooled in despair once the tree burst into two, exposing the silhouette of a lioness bathed in flame. Karn! Before the petrified grizzly had a chance to react, a garnished streak of metal and blood ripped through his chestplate. A fury of swipes bombarded the general's armor and flesh. Combs of fur and blood littering the ground beneath them. Harm couldn't escape the lioness's wrath. Nadja hurled herself back and swung her legs into Karm's rib. A haunting harmony of cracking bone and steel ruptured from impact, sending the bear soaring across the encampment. Karm's battered body ricochets across the battlefield. He snares his claws into a dirt anchor to anchor himself, but wasn't given a single moment for even catching his breath. The lioness would not wait for blood. Nadja, bearing no remorse, swung a devastating uppercut to the grizzly's jaw. Her raw strength projected the bear off his feet, yet Nadja was not done. With unworldly precision, she grasped him by the ankle mid-air and flung him over her head like a makeshift club, slamming him face first into the dirt. She flung his hefty body over her head with ease and whips his head back into the hard ground. She relentlessly bombards his body to the ground like a rag doll. Nadja's vision faded into a bleak haze of red. She lost herself to the frenzy, yet relished every second within it. She had lost everything. All of it had been taken away by the one she'd pledged herself to, blinded by the shallow promises of grandeur to keep her going. She had enthralled by glory, by honor and beauty. They were used and swiftly discarded once they'd outlived their usefulness. They'd stolen everything from her. Nadja cursed the very existence of the highborn. She would rampage and slaughter each and every one of them. It wouldn't start with the general. It would start with the general. She lifted Karm above her head, bringing him down over her knee, with his back meeting her with a crack. An antagonizing gasp burst from Karm. The air ripped from his lungs. A new, blistering pain ran up and down his spine. He grunted as Nadja went down and sank her claws into his face. She hooked her talons deep in his flesh, gripping tightly into his muscle before swinging him behind her and tossing him afar. Karm's full body collides against the base of a tree. A disturbing groan of metal, wood, and bone crunched from the general's ribs. He growled out meekly in pain and fury. He tried to find any means to regain himself, defend himself, but couldn't. She broke him. Nadja could see the anguish residing over the grizzly. She took the desperation melting off his face. He was afraid of her. Good. She wanted him to be afraid, but more importantly, she wanted this to hurt. Littered between them now were the full remains of her comrades. Every life was fueled with her rage. It assumed that the instant she drew. I chose a battle axe, because that looks badass. And it's fitting. Execution style! She lurched down to an imperial corpse and unholstered the axe from the knight's possession. It gleamed without a scratch or drop of blood on it. This weapon of war had been thirsting for action. She would happily sate it. Karm ripped through the bark of a tree with his claws, and he hugged himself to it while his trembling legs left him staggered. The blazing fires that ensued around him deafened his senses. His assailant left him near battered and confused. The roars of the burning forest, however, were swiftly cut out by a brief whistle in the wind. Carm collapsed, writhing in agony on the ground. Pulsing sensation of burning pins and needles ripped across the side of his body, with a searing pain at his shoulder. He writhed in agony with dirt spreading a streak of foaming red. Suspended over him was his arm, still fidgeting, barely any life in it, cut clean through by the axe. The grizzly wallowed in his suffering whilst clutching the air in disbelief. He refused to admit it. The chunk of arm at his feet was his. His furry paw was drenched in blood as it flowed freely from his digits. Nadja stood there above him, enjoying every minute of his suffering. Her malicious gaze crawled away from him, now admiring the blood-stained axe embedded in the tree, the arm clinging to it, dangling. She could have ended it right there, but her rage, that sheer, unsettling rage, seduced her to do more. She wanted more. She ripped the dangling arm clean from the axe, her talons into the warm flesh, dragging the bear's claw toward the general's face. A vile glare poured from her eyes as she stared into his, threatening to drown him in her hatred. A flash of barbarianism swallowed Carm's vision in a haze of blood. Nadja whipped his arm furiously across his battered body. Streaks of cuts, bruises covered his body. Clumps of hair ripped free as his own claws mutilated him. Talk about beating somebody to death with their own arm. Nadja hammered the armored limb across his body again and again and again. Each walloping thwack against the bear was met with a bone-churning cackle. Nadja stopped once the arm had become limp and malformed. It was simply a slab of meat and jagged bone now. She slammed the arm against his face, leaving him grasping for air after the volley of pain. Her attention, however, was pitted solely on the axe embedded in the tree above his head. She clasped onto its leather grip and snatched it free with one mighty heave from her waist. The weight of the axe is meant for two hands, but Nadja only needed one to wield this precious, crimson-blemished weapon. She dragged the weapon over the ground as she prowled over her foe. The sound of heavy metal dragging through the dirt grabs the attention of Carm's bloodshot eyes. He knew death was coming. He feebly tries to crawl away as the lioness towered over him now. Nadja dragged the blade beside his head. His gasping, choking death rattles on deaf ears. As the lioness raised the axe, she was lost in the bloodlust. Her actions not her own. She was at her very core primal now. Instincts alone guided her arms, the axe coming to strike into her true prey. Screeching, the sound of metal on torn metal shot through the roaring blaze of the forest. The axe was engulfed by blood, fur, organs, and fat. Nadja had hammered the blade into Carm's guts. The impact created an ungodly chorus of antagonizing cries and squelching flesh. She tried to lift the axe to deliver another strike, but it was met with resistance. The general's armor clung to the axe as though it had become part of him. The axe had remained firmly ensnared in his armored gut. Nadja scowled, gripping at the axe with bloody paws. She lifted the axe and Carm with it. She swung it against the tree, cutting the general in half. The raw strength sent the two halves of the general in the far distance away. Drenched in viscera, she stood at the base of the tree, her grip held firmly on the axe, now entombed in the tree. She started to tremble, unhinged, and shaking to her core. The axe was the only thing that left her feeling grounded. Without it, she felt as though she would spiral through the world endlessly. Carm's body, at least the top half, sprawled in front of Nadja. The proud and dreaded general was now reduced to a torn-up ragdoll of his former self. No soul was housed in this meat sack before her. Nadja couldn't help but snarl at the sight of his corpse. An undying vendetta suffocated her mind with rage, but it wouldn't do her any good now. She needed to direct those emotions elsewhere. She couldn't afford to think of her losses. She couldn't afford to think of her daughter's precious smile. The air suddenly felt heavier. The lioness heaved and gasped, hyperventilating. That's a badass artwork of her. Nadja felt sick to her stomach now. The pure, untamed rage she'd felt had consumed her and piqued her to her limits. Her emotions spiraled out of control, sending her mind into a deep, dark, abysmal world of pain and delusion. Her vision began to wake as her sanity started to switch reality back into her mind. She'd lost her people, she'd lost her baby. She wanted to vomit. She clutched her fists into her heart and breathed helpless deeply. She still had work to be done. Harm was the first to wrong her, but he wouldn't be the last to know this mother's scorn. Naja picked up herself and stormed her way back to the encampment. She mentally readied herself for any opposition that would stand in her way. She would kill them all, just the same as Karn. She needed to carry her people's legacy forward. She needed to push on. She once let out a sharp grunt. A tingling pain crept over her. The sword wound in her stomach began to pus over. She'd completely forgotten about it. She lost in her frenzy. She lost track of everything. Even the moment she had ripped the sword out of herself, nothing in this world frightened her, let alone worry about bleeding out. The feeling of pain felt foreign to her. She wanted to leave behind. A feeling she wanted to leave behind. A monstrous roar wailed from the encampment. Naja's eyes darted over the horrendous, hideous noise. Her expression greeted with a look of dread. Damn it, he brought those things with him too. She gritted her teeth as the mere thought of them. They were Karma's personal armor guard. Before, even during the war, they always banished Shaskara. Naja took a deep breath and let the rage wash over her once more. She wasn't going to let her fear of them stop. Not even death, but she stepped forward. General Karn, Naja, where do you think you're going? We're not finished here. Naja halted dead in her step. She was paralyzed with utter disbelief of what she heard. A cold draft swept across her, snuffing out the light of the world. Pure blackness. She wiped her attention back to the distant voice. Her gasp on reality shattered on what she beheld. Arm was alive. None of his fur nor armor brandished with any damage or ruthless assault. He stood stoically, and heated glare aimed toward her. But where do you think you're going? Naja blinked in bewilderment. How was he alive? She staggered back in awe at what she was seeing, all the losing her hold on reality itself. Her paw felt the dead grass around her turn cold and rough. Her vision expanded to reveal she was back at the fortress. What? Karm stared down at her at the entrance of the war room. The corridors leading out of the room began to shrink into darkness, while the affairs of the war room grew larger. She hissed at the blinding light. Get back here. The grizzly stood there idly, firm, determination in his posture. His demands held stronger and confident. How dare he? Naja thought, how dare he speak to her like this? How dare he stand tall and proud in the wake of the turmoil he caused? To demand more than there was nothing left. How dare he give her orders? Her mind snapped to her as her confusion mutated into aggression. She swore he'd drawn his last breath. She would happily do it again to make sure. She wanted this to be over. The lioness clenched her fist and charged the bear. She raised her fist high, readying to pummel him again, but her fist never reached. Her wrists were ensnared by thick links of chain. A mighty force pulled her back with her wrists away from the general, snarling rabid beast. She bared her fangs and claws at the constraints, trying to tear free. Another chain found its way to her wrist. The chains pulled back with such might she had no way to oppose it. Each attempt to break. Snowball, move. Damn cat. I'm trying to read. Move the cat.
Move!
Move, Snowball. Get bad cat. With such might she had no way to oppose it. Really? Such might she had no way to oppose it. Each attempt to break free of her monstrous strength was met with the solidarity of the chains. Her heart raced as the situation slapped her across the face. She was powerless to do anything. And worst of all, she was helpless. The ground beneath her began to tremble. The chains tightened around her wrists, pulling her back with every thunderous quake produced. She jerked her head back to steal gaze from over her shoulder. Her worst fear rang true as she spotted what lay beyond the dark. Her captors stepped into the light, revealing the monstrous armor-clad selves to her. They were Karm's personal vanguard forces, the Dirge. Their build alone doubled Nadja's height and tripled her muscle. Harm, you fucking guy. While she returned her gaze to the general, she was met with a brutal jab to the eye. Parham was standing before her with a grimace plastered to his face. That's enough out of you. For too long we've put up with your outlandish behaviors. We've took pity on you when you'd lost your farmlands, but now you've taken advantage of our generosity for the last time. Parham slammed his fist down against her muzzle, cutting her snout open on impact. He wasn't finished with her. He gripped his right paw around her throat, forcing her eyes to meet his. On behalf of the Majesty and His Majesty's army, believe me when I say we're done with you. The grizzly let go of her and snapped his fingers to his men. Nadja gasped for air, grunted and spat at him. Her arms quaked with struggling against her binds. Kark! The outcries were cut off by a solid cold metal collar snapped around her neck. Sharp spikes jabbed at the sensitive flesh line the interior, cutting off her air. A thick iron rod connected to the collar to its master, easily manhandling the lioness to its wind. She was pulled back, dragged along the floor on her back. She was met with a monolith of soldier glaring down at her. It raised its leg overhead. She couldn't move. Her heart plummeted as her assailant slammed its devastating foot onto her skull. The impending force of the blow sent her body down, causing her to spaz frantically. The jolt of the impact caused her to flail around and sink into the ground once more, this time with a heavy thud. Her mind drifted out from her body and descending into a weightless void. Thud. Nadja groaned at the harsh fall. A white light burned to the back of her retinas. Her eyes fluttered open through the stinging rays as she tried to make sense of what she was looking at. She was in a medical tent. You finished the demo. Thanks for playing. Okay, apparently that ended early. That was an amazing game. Thanks for watching, guys. That's really all I have to say, and I hope you enjoyed this series. It was pretty short compared to normal. I was honestly hoping there would be more gameplay out of this, but yeah. So please do check out this game. I'm sure the creators would love that. But yeah, let me know if you guys want to see me play more games like this, and bye.